Okay, welcome back to my channel. It's the end of a month or the beginning of a month, depending on how you look at it. And that means it's time for another monthly reading wrap-up, talking about all the books that I read in the month of September. So, I have with me here the books that I read that I have in a physical form, and then I'll also talk about the books that I read on my Kindle. Obviously, in total I read 27 books this month, so that means that we've got a lot to get through, and I'm going to try and make this as speedy as possible. So let's dive into it. The first book that I read this month is A Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. I read this for a video, so if you haven't watched that video, go watch it. It's me reading new authors for a week. And this is a Nordic fantasy. Our main character has like a special power that she's kept hidden, and when it comes out, she is all of a sudden highly sought after, and all of these people want to control her power, and she goes on what English Lit me would call the hero's journey, and the end ends with a super shocking cliffhanger ending, as fantasy books in a series tend to do, and as fantasy books in a series tend to be when I read them, the next book's not out yet. So that does mean I have to wait for book 2 to be released, and I'm actually, let me look and see if I can find. The second one's called A Curse Carved in Bone, and it comes out in May of 2025. So I've got a while to wait before I can get my hands on it, but for now, this one was 4 stars. I really enjoyed it, and it was different for me because I don't often read a lot of like Nordic fantasy books, so learned a lot, honestly. Next, I read All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata, and I've now read, I think, 4 or 5 Mariana Zapata books, and every time I read one, they're so good. I don't know why I ever forget that they're good. She knows what she's doing. They're always a slow burn. This one is obviously no exception. It's single dad, and the FMC shows up to rent the like above garage apartment at his house, but turns out his son rented it out to her without his knowledge. Rhodes is the dad. So Rhodes like begrudgingly kind of lets her stay there, and they form a friendship. She forms a friendship with the son, and it's slow burn. It's just a romance. Like, really, it's a romance with a really lovable MMC and FMC, and there's a cute small town, and it's great. And I gave it 5 stars. Next, A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. This was also for that video. This was my first Ashley Poston book, and after this, as you'll see later on this month, I actually also read The 7-Year Slip. I, if you can tell, did do some tabbing. I really enjoyed this book, and the general premise is your main character, Eileen, or Elsie, she is going on like a book club retreat, except none of her other book club members could go, so she decides to go by herself. And while she's on the way there, she somehow ends up in the small town from her favorite book series, which is a town that does not exist. So she's like trying to figure out, how do I leave? Like, this is literally the perfect town, and I know all of these characters, and she takes it upon herself to help matchmake and fix some of the things that have been going wrong in this town. And while doing that, she falls in love. There's kind of a twist about the MMC, but he's also like in this small town, and she's like, I can't fall in love with this man. He's a character in this town. Like, how am I supposed to, like, this can't be a real relationship. So there's kind of that dichotomy happening. But if you're like a bookish reader girl, Eileen is like for us. She is me. I am her. So I loved it. I gave that one 4 stars. I think I originally had it like leaning more towards 5, but then I read the 7-Year Slip, and like when I think about them next to each other, this was not as good as the 7-Year Slip. So it's a 4.5, but like rounded down to 4 on Goodreads. Next, I read Not Safe for Work. This is a workplace romance. I love a workplace romance, and it's set in like Silicon Valley, like sales, and it honestly does a really good job and commentary of talking about how women are treated in a predominantly male field, such as tech sales. It's mostly men. She's the only woman on her team, and she constantly gets taken advantage of and looked over for promotions, even though she deserves them and she's doing the hard work. And one day she's asked to date a client to help make a sale, and she's basically like, no, I can't do that. Like, that's unethical, and I don't feel right about this. I don't want to date this man. Like, that's basically pimping me out. And so in order to kind of avoid that, she says that she's already dating someone. And so she starts fake dating this guy in the office who turns out has had a crush on her for years. And so he agrees, obviously, because he has a crush on her. And it's really sweet. And I loved the MMC in this. And the FMC was so awesome, strong, loved her. As I said, it was good representation for an underrepresented field in romance. But I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Next, I read Carrie Soto is Back. I also read this in a video, which was my roommate picks what I read for a week. So you can hear all my thoughts about this in that video if you want more in-depth thoughts. But I did end up giving this one 5 stars. Taylor Jenkins Reid is such an amazing author. I've given all of her books 5 stars. I think this might be one of my favorites of hers. I have not read Malibu Rising, and everyone says they love Malibu Rising, so I'll have to give that one a chance soon. But for now, I also read this during the US Open, which part of this book is set at the US Open, like the big finale is, which was just perfect. And I loved learning about tennis. I like all of a sudden am like really into tennis, and I think this was really, really well done. And I loved how Taylor made Carrie honestly an unlikable character for the first 60 to 70% of the book. I wasn't rooting for her, but she really turned it around and made me want to root for her in the end. And I think that's such good character development that was to make me viscerally not like a character and then in the end be rooting for them is just amazing. So props to Taylor for that. I love this book. I gave it 5 stars. Next, I read The 7-Year Slip, also, like I said, by Ashley Poston. This was for that same video, so again, go watch it. But like I said, I did give The 7-Year Slip 5 stars. I think all of Ashley Poston's books are this kind of magical realism vibe. I would not classify them as fantasy because it's not fantasy, but there is that magical element to all of them, and I love that. You would think that it would be hard to get into and relate to a book where it's literally a magical apartment that sends her 7 years back in time, but turns out you can really get into it and you can really fall in love with the characters. I loved the MMC in this. I loved the FMC in this. I think the way the story unfolded was amazing. Also, a chef. The MMC is a chef, which I think is so hot. I read Savor It last month by Tara DeWitt, and he's also, and the MMC in that is a chef, and I love that. I eat it up. So I gave the 7-year slip 5 stars. Next, we have The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. This was, again, that same video, so go watch that video. But I will say, this was also 5 stars. So every book that I read in that video was 5 stars. I really enjoyed all of them, and honestly, my roommate picked books that have been on my shelf. Like, I owned all of these for a year and just had never picked up. So thank you to her for making me read these books finally, because they're 5 stars. This is a Narnia reimagining. It's fantasy light. I also read the Unmaking of June this month. I'll talk about that later, but this felt very similar to that in that it's like set in modern day North Carolina, rural town, and there's like a magical element. In this book, they go into the forest and it transports them to Shenandoah, which is like Narnia, and they have these adventures there. There's like 4 main characters, 2 boys who have grown up to men, and 2 girls. And there is like an LGBTQ element, which I loved. There's a love story in this that's amazing. So I highly recommend. I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I read The Best Thing by Mariana Zapata. As I said, I love all of her books. This one had me weeping. I'll insert the video now.
I look absolutely crazy right now, but I just finished. My chest is wet from tears. I just finished The Best Thing by Mariana Zapata. The epilogue did not need to do me like this. I was okay up until then. Ooh. That was not cool. I'm like not gonna recover from that. Now I know why I saw all the reactions to this book being people sobbing, crying. And I was like, what could they be crying for? Now I know. Oh, that was brutal. But also good. It was a good book. The epilogue will get you, though. You could probably skip the epilogue if you don't feel like crying.
But I truly cannot say enough good things about all of her stuff. This was single mom, accidental pregnancy. He's a rugby player, which was like hot, and I've never read a book with a rugby player MMC before. And she's just like such a strong, independent, badass woman who just wants the best for her child. And obviously there's also a romance. So 5 stars. Next, I read My Roommate is a Vampire by Jenna Levine. This was me kind of getting into the spooky fall season a little bit more. This was 3 stars. It was okay. It's a witchy romance, but not witchy. It's a vampire romance. Like, he's a vampire, she's a human. There's hijinks. They're roommates. Like, it is what it is. If you're looking for something like spooky light for this time of year, then I would recommend it. But it's nothing outstanding. Next, I read Slow Dance by Rainbow Rowell. I read this for book club, and I ended up giving this one 3.75, so 4 on Goodreads. And I think the main reason why this got a lower rating is because I could not stand Shiloh. She was the FMC. I could not stand her. I hated her fashion. She was annoying. She was a pick-me girl. Like, I did not like it. I think that Carrie, who's the NMC, is a saint for putting up with her. This is kind of a second chance romance. It's kind of like friends to lovers, childhood friends to lovers. She's now a single mom, divorced with 2 kids. He's military. I also don't love a military element. And they reconnect at a wedding, like 10 years after they graduate from high school. It was good. This is Rainbow Rowell's like adult debut. I haven't read any other Rainbow Rowell. People love her YA stuff, and maybe she just is better at YA, but I didn't love this. So 3.75. Next, I read The Au Pair Affair by Tessa Bailey. I read 3 different hockey romances this month. I love hockey romance. Like, truly, nothing will beat that for me when I need something comforting. It's hockey romance. Never been to a hockey game. But this is, as the title suggests, she is the au pair. He is a single dad. And that's all you really need to know. I ended up giving this one 3 stars. It's spicy, very spicy. I would give this like a 3 on the spice scale out of 5, but I loved it. I ate it up. So good job, Tessa, on this one. I will be reading the next one in the series because they're interconnected, and I love the dynamic of the 2 people that are going to be the main characters in the next book, so can't wait for that. Next, I got into a series of 3 fantasy books. I'm going to talk about all of them right now. They are Trial of the Sun Queen, Rule of the Aurora King, and Fate of the Sun King. So I'm waiting for book 4 to come out, but I'm going to talk about all 3 of them in one. I gave all of them 4 stars. I cannot wait for the 4th book to come out. This is a 5-star series for me. It's on Kindle Unlimited, and the reason why I'm combining them is because I feel like I can't talk about books 2 and 3 without spoiling any things. So I'm just going to kind of give you a general premise, but basically our main character, our FMC, she starts out as a prisoner. It's kind of giving Prison Healer vibes. If you've read The Prison Healer, it's similar, but this is an adult version. The Prison Healer is YA. She starts out in prison, and one day, like, she gets broken out. She doesn't really know why, but she wakes up in the Sun Palace, and she finds out she's competing in the Trials of the Sun Queen, which is, think, selection. There's a bunch of women competing in 4 different trials to become the queen. She's competing, and the whole time you kind of figure out that she's hiding something. You don't really know what, but the king seems to know, and that's kind of why he is trying to get to know her, because he wants to know the secret that she's hiding. Anyway, I recommend the whole series. Eventually she, like, I can't say, but it's really good. I read the 3rd one in my Reading Fantasy Books for a Week video, which is going up today. I'm exporting it while I'm filming this, so if you want to see me read some of that series and talk about it a little bit more, watch that video. So now we're getting to books that I read at the beach for my book club retreat. This is a special edition of the Breakup Pact. It's got beautiful sprayed edges. At the back, the inside covers also have beautiful illustrations. But I got this in my Illumicrate, my Afterlight subscription box, so I didn't get to choose it, but I am actually really excited because I really liked the Breakup Pact. This was Emma Lord's adult romance debut. I will say this again, as I said for Rainbow Rowell, I think her YA books are better. This was good. I gave it 4 stars. Her YA books have been 5 stars in my mind. The basic plot is that our 2 main characters each were broken up with on like a national scale. They've gone viral, and in order to kind of make their exes jealous and prove that they've moved on, they start to fake date. But they're also childhood friends, and there's like a childhood friends to lovers moment happening there. There's obviously fake dating, there's some spice, and she's also trying to save the tea shop that she owns because business is down and she's trying to save it. So that's like a subplot for the whole thing. And he's also like an aspiring writer, and so they try and help each other along the way, and that's kind of a subplot that weaves throughout. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Elizabeth of East Hampton. I read Emma of 83rd Street earlier this year. It's a Pride and Prejudice retelling, a modern retelling. I devoured, ate up, 5 stars. I love Pride and Prejudice, so basically any retelling I'm gonna love. I felt the same way about Eligible by Curtis Seinfeld, which is also a modern Pride and Prejudice retelling, but when you put the characters in a modern setting, they get so much more annoying. Miss Bennet, so annoying. Kitty and Lydia, annoying. Although I do think Kitty and Lydia in this book had some redemption, which they don't have in Eligible or in actual Pride and Prejudice, which I appreciated. I liked getting to see them have some redemption in their storyline. Darcy was a blonde. That's my only con. Why did they make him blonde? He's a brunette. Anyway, it's set in the Hamptons. The Bennets live there, and they like own a bakery, and of course the Bingleys and Darcy come to spend the summer on the Hamptons because they're rich and from New York. But it also connects to Emma and Knightley from Emma of 83rd. So I would read that one first, even though technically, sure, you could read this by itself. It's a Pride and Prejudice retelling. I would read Emma first. So, 5 stars. Next, I read my second hockey romance of the month, and that is Good Boy by Serena Bowen and Elle Kennedy. They wrote it together, and this is part of the Wags series, so I read both books in the series this month. Good Boy is a brother's best friend situation. She hooks up with her brother's friend and decides it was a one-time thing, it was a mistake, but he keeps kind of pursuing her, and what starts out as just casual sex becomes something more. The only thing about this one that I didn't love is the MMC was annoying a little bit. He was kind of childish. His little sayings were annoying to me, but that being said, I gave it 3 stars. Next, I read The Deepest End of Love by Licinia Coney. I've read the other books in the series. This was the 3rd and final book in the Brightest Light series. All of them are age gap. This one had a 12-year age gap, and he is her internship advisor, and she's a student. She's 22, he's 34. Obviously it's romance, it's age gap. I love age gap. I really, really do. That's why I picked up this whole series, because all of them are age gap. But I have previously also read other student or professor student romances, and I do not like them. They just rub me the wrong way. I think it's not against the law, but it's taboo. You can get fired over it for a reason. So I don't love that. I did end up giving this one 3.5 stars. It was a really good way to end the series. I read an arc of it, but it came out at the end of September, so it's out now. It's Kindle Unlimited. Those are my thoughts. Next, I read Stay, the second book in the Wags series and my 3rd hockey romance of the year. This one is single dad. He has twin daughters, and she owns the delivery service that he uses a lot. And basically he pursues her from the very beginning. Like, she goes over to his house to walk his dog, and he like sees her on the camera and thinks, oh my gosh, she's so cute. So he messages her and they start like a little flirtationship. They go on a few dates. The sex is really hot. He's such a good single dad. I'm obsessed with him. I love single dad. I give this one 4 stars. Next, I read The God of the Woods by Liz Moore. I read this for book club. This is a mystery thriller. It's dual POV, multi POV. I don't want to say dual. It's multi POV, multi timeline. So it's a little confusing. I will say that. Multi POV and multi timeline is not for the weak. And I feel like for 85% of the book, nothing happened. I told my roommate this because she also read it. The whole book felt like, I hope you're hungry for nothing. It wasn't giving anything really until the last 15% when we got all the reveals and they started to actually do like police work. With that being said, I did end up giving this one 3.5 stars. It wasn't for me, even though it's been like highly acclaimed and talked about. It was not my cup of tea. Next, I read What If It's You by Julie Gagin, and there's no cover for this yet on Goodreads, so this is an ARC, and I will say I felt as though I needed to be much smarter to read this book. The concept was fun in theory. It was kind of like that movie Sliding Doors or Sliding Glass Doors with Gwyneth Paltrow, where it's like, this is what your life would have looked like if you had made this one different decision, except it incorporates AI and like multiple universes, and there was lots of talk about like supercomputers and different universe. It was a little confusing, I will say that. So it's not for the weak. And I honestly wasn't sure if our MMC was going to have a happy ending. It was one of those things where I was like, is this going to end well? I'm not sure. It did, but this one's not for the weak, I will say that. I did give it 4 stars, but go into it with your eyes open because it's hard to wrap your mind around for a lot of it. Next, I read Immortal Longings by Chloe Gong. I read this for my fantasy books video. So again, go watch that. I'm always plugging my other videos because you get much more details in there. But this is her adult fantasy debut. It's a reimagining of Antony and Cleopatra. It's kind of like the Hunger Games. There's a competition where they have to kill each other, and the winner gets a lot of money and they get to meet the king. She enters the competition because she wants to kill the king. And so her whole goal is to win so that she can meet him and kill him. And she forms an alliance, and I think I've seen this film before and I didn't like the ending. It's just like Katniss and Peeta. From the beginning, you can predict they're going to be left at the end. Are they going to kill each other? What's going to happen? They can't both win. And of course they're going to fall in love. Of course they are. So there's some tension there. I did end up giving this one 5 stars. I can't wait for book 2 to come out. I actually already have it on my shelf. Book 3 comes out sometime soon, but can't wait to read book 2. I knew nothing about Antony and Cleopatra, still really don't. So to me, it means nothing that it was a reimagining, but it might to you. I gave this one 5 stars. Next, I read Crossroads by Devney Perry. This was a shock to me. I've read lots of Devney Perry at this point. I think I've read about 8 or 9 of her books, but I don't know why I get shocked when they're actually so good. I gave this one 4 stars, 4.5, and I read it on my Kindle and then felt as though I needed to buy the physical copy because I really enjoyed it. It's cowboy, it's a second chance romance. It's kind of also childhood friends to lovers, but it's like she like vacations at the ranch where he works or where he lives every year. His family owns it, and so they only see each other for a week every year, and you get to see the different weeks as she's growing up, and also now she has bought the ranch. She's the new owner, and that causes some tension, obviously. It's so good. West, Cowboy Goals. I cannot wait for book 2, which comes out October 15th. Sunlight, because I want to be back at Haven River Ranch, and I can't wait for it. So I gave this one 4 stars. Next, I read The Kiss Curse by Erin Sterling. This is the second to the X-Hex, and this was 3 stars. As I said when I was talking about My Roommate is a Vampire, it's a witchy romance. Like, I wasn't expecting a lot. I do think the romance was cute. There's always kind of a little bit of a mystery that they're trying to solve. It's enemies to lovers. She's a witch. He's a witch. That's all. It's 3 stars for me. Next, I read The Unmaking of June. This was in my fantasy video. This, similarly to The Lost Story, as I said, is more like urban fantasy. It's modern, set in 2023 in rural North Carolina, except there's magic. There's a magical element where all the women in her family have this curse. She doesn't really know what it is. She comes to discover what it is, and she discovers this while trying to figure out what happened to her mom. Her mom mysteriously disappeared, and so clues start coming up, and as she starts putting together these clues about what happened to her mom, she starts to discover like what this curse is and what has been happening to the women in her family for generations. Her name is June. Obviously, there's kind of like a star-crossed lovers moment. The love is really good, and I thought for a minute there was like a love triangle. I don't know that there really is. There's a little bit of a love triangle, but it's not fully fleshed out. I will say, if you watch that video, I'm a genius. I wrote in my notes 2 things from the beginning that I predicted would happen, and they both came true. So I felt really good about that, because for about 50% of the book, similar to What If It's You, there's multiple timelines and multiple universes, and it gets confusing. It's hard to wrap your head around, but I will just tell you this: if you want to read this book, I would just continue as if you know what's going on. Don't try too hard to figure it out. Just power through and be like, sure, whatever, it doesn't really make sense, but I'm gonna ignore it. Eventually it will make sense. If you spend too long trying to figure it out, you're just gonna confuse yourself more. And you'll figure it out in the end, do not worry. So, I ended up giving this one 5 stars. Well, 4.5, but very close to 5 stars. I would definitely recommend this. I've had it on my shelf for a while, and I'm glad that I finally read it. The next 2 books that I read, and the final 2 books that I read, are both arcs. That would be My Favorite Boss by Melanie Moreland and The Perfect Romcom by Melissa Ferguson. We'll start with My Favorite Boss. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this because I didn't like it. I gave it 2 stars, and I don't like to badmouth books. I will just say I didn't like it. It wasn't for me. We'll quickly pivot to The Perfect Romcom by Melissa Ferguson. This was my first book that I've read by Melissa Ferguson, and I'm going to read a little bit of my review that I wrote on Goodreads because I think I said it well. I said, as the title suggests, this is a rom-com. But as you get into the book, it felt a little bit like a secondary plot to the main storyline, which is an author trying to save the community center that she loves and the story of her community. It's beautiful. Don't get me wrong, the romance is so cute, but it was bolstered by a really, truly wonderful story of community and overcoming. The romance didn't really kick in until about 65% in, and even then, I loved them together, but they also, it still wasn't the main premise. She's an author, she's trying to write a book. That's like the main thing. I don't want to say anymore. I feel like as though I'm gonna spoil it. I will give you this really cute line that made me like kick my feet and do a little giggle, and that would be, "You weren't dating me, but I was dating you." That'll hit. This book doesn't come out until February of next year, but mark your calendars. I would highly recommend. I ended up giving this one 4 stars. So those are all of the books that I read in the month of September. 27 books total. As I said, I have lots planned for October, and I hope that I get through some really good books. 2 videos ago was my fall TBR, and I'm gonna be continuing to try and read the books on my fall TBR and get through my fall TBR. I've currently read 2 of them that are in this video, and those are going to be The Unmaking of June and The Kiss Curse. I've still got more to go, but for now, I've read 2 of my fall TBR, so I feel pretty good about that. Thank you so much for watching. Follow me on TikTok, Instagram, everywhere else, because I post bookish content all over the internet, and you don't want to miss out. With that being said, I will see you guys in another video or somewhere else on the internet. Bye guys.